I don't know. I find this product strategy is a bit tricky because it's not always that important with a product strategy. Because what is the most important thing of the company? And let's say 2018 when I joined, the most important thing of Oda, of everything at Oda in 2018 was to get an operational model that was extremely effective. Without that, we couldn't serve the product in a sustainable way. So the product strategy was pretty simple. It was sort of, cut the weird branches that doesn't create a lot of value, that just create complexity operationally, and then keep the rest, high quality and good, and do not add a lot of things to the product. Just keep it as it is, because then if you lock down the product, you can rebuild out the operational model to sustain that product in an effective way. If you're starting to pull in a lot of weirdness into the product while you're trying to sort of fix your operational model to support it, it's going to be hard. So it was very easy to set a product strategy that year. It was basically, let's keep the product. Let's cut out those, branches that are deviations and creating weird stuff in the operation. And let's focus on operation.
Hey there, and welcome back. My name is Afonso, and I've interviewed more than 30 product leaders in Scandinavia, and I'm very, very happy to share this conversation with you. Today, I'm talking with Marius Røstad, CPO at Aidn, and Espen Sundve, former CPO at Oda. How does Oda build products and organize itself to sustain one of the most interesting scaling cases in tech in Norway? And how is Aidn doing that today? One of the most interesting tech scaleups in Norway in the healthcare space. Well, you'll find out soon, as well as learn both Marius and Espen's perspectives on things like product strategy, internationalization, team topologies, the importance of speed, how to foster alignment in your organization, and so much more. Make sure you don't miss out on future interviews and subscribe to the podcast and newsletter. All right, let's dive in. We have spoken so many times on this podcast about how talking frequently with users is so important for product teams. It lets you understand user needs, test your designs, and make sure you're building the right products. But many teams tell me that they can't find time for it in their busy workday because recruiting the right users is too hard. So I want to quickly mention a company I'm advising that can help you with this. UX Signals lets you target users inside your website or app and automatically book interviews into your calendar. So you can put the recruiting on autopilot and just show up for the conversations. Instead of waiting weeks, you can get interviews within a few hours and talk to people while they'll still have the user experience fresh in their minds. It's used by big companies and public organizations like DNB Bank, Vipps Mobile Pay, NAV, and many more, who are building digital products and services with millions of users. I really recommend checking it out on uxsignals.com or by clicking the link in the show notes. Tell them Afonso sent you and you'll get a 50% off your trial. Okay, guys, we are live. It's such a pleasure to see you both. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How are you guys doing? How's life, Espen? I think you have a lot to tell us.
Yeah. I've been on a roller coaster for 7 years and I had a couple of months to relax. So I think my head is finally sort of seeing clear things now. And it's been good. Starting a new job very soon and I'm excited about that. But it's been good to have some quiet months.
Sounds really, really nice. So good to hear and also good, very exciting job ahead. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit as well. And Marius, how about you?
Yep, as I told you guys right before, I haven't had the hiatus part of it. It's been a roller coaster as well. We handed in our first tender process 2 days ago, so that was kind of like a huge milestone for me and the company, and that's a massive amount of work I learned. So I've been in B2C before, now B2E, totally different game. So.
Absolutely. No, I can only imagine. Anyway, let's get started. I have so much to cover with both of you. I'm very, very grateful you managed to be here and took the time. Espen, you've been CPO at Oda for almost 7 years, and you are now back again shortly, as you said, to Schibsted. In fact, before that, before Oda, you were VP of Product at Schibsted. And Marius, you are a CPO at Aidn, and before that you held several product leader roles, including at NetLife and at Ruter, and also with some experience in media. So there's a lot to dig into. I mean, come on, you guys have very inspiring careers. That's awesome. So let's get started. Espen, first one for you. Uda, as you said, has been such a roller coaster, such an interesting growth case. What were some of the principles that you tried to foster in the organization when you look back as a success case?
I mean, several, but I think when I joined, it was pretty clear that they had some highly functioning sort of way of thinking about the building the company and the product, and they weren't all articulated. So it's more about articulating those that were there and helping scaling those into the organization. But I think one thing that was clear that we've kept on for a long period of time is taking an end-to-end approach of what we're doing, building a new solution for an entire industry. You have to think about the entire sort of system of it and obsess over continuous improvement. So that has been there always. Like look end-to-end and sort of really obsess about it, continuously improving all the parts. Other elements of, understanding problems before you solve them, typical thing, solving root causes together across functions. That was there in the founding team and something that we did along the way. There's one thing I think one of the PMs coined it recently, actually, but speed, I think, is a goal in and of itself. Just to be really fast, because then you ship faster, you learn faster, and you iterate. And if it was wrong, you fixed it before anyone else get out of the trenches. So a couple of those, I could go on, but maybe one thing which I think was there in the beginning, it had to take different forms, obviously, when we scaled, is continuously removing barriers for people to actually be able to learn, understand the context of the company, and take part in shaping where we're heading. They were really good at that when I joined, and then we've sort of had to find different ways of doing that as we scale, but it's always been there, really sort of open culture, sharing openly, giving people a good idea of where we're heading, and basically make it easy to learn how we perform and what we could do to do better things. Those are some examples top of mind.
Very interesting. Thanks for sharing. I want to dig into one of them or two of them. Continuous improvement. That's something you mentioned, and that was my impression as well from hearing conversations from you before, and also people at Uda. Is it continuous improvement regarding everything, both product and ways of working as well, or one more than the other?
No, it's the totality. So I mean, it's every aspect of the product, but it's also every aspect of all processes to, workflows internally, whatever we do to sort of create and offer that product and market in a good way, in an effective way, in a profitable way, So, but also how we think about our people, how we, create a better place to work, improve our processes for hiring, improve our processes for, onboarding the team. We had so I think like one practical example, like first time I hired, we write down how we hire and we continuously improve that process. So it's been on all the sort of core processes of the company, both externally, obviously, but also internally.
Very good. Marius, how about you? Did any of these principles resonate more than other? And do you have any particular principle that you're very focused these days on fostering at Aidn?
Yeah, I think most everything Espen said is resonated in a way. I think we have, like when I started, we had a bunch of like the more classical ones, which is like outcome over output, like those kind of things. But I think over time, we always had kind of like that get stuff out and learn or ship fast and iterate. But over time, it's been more and more articulated into speed, like Espen said as well, like speed as a core principle or value of the company has just become kind of apparent. I think it's been good to say it out loud in a way for the company to kind of just like acknowledge that speed is that big value. It's kind of like a core differentiator, I think, in the market we're in as well, in health, where speed is definitely not something that's normal. That's a core differentiator for us. But it brings its own set of challenges in a way as well, like that speed, because it also means like the iteration part, like the get stuff out. It's all about like what's good enough in a way. Like how do you know when it's good enough to ship it? Yeah, I think speed is kind of like the core principle that we're focused on at the moment.
And that's really interesting, because I actually wanted to ask you specifically about speed, because both contexts of Aidn and Uda, for example, are very, very different. And Aidn being, highly regulatory context. So I wanted to ask you, how do you balance that? So I know you have a few beta customers right now. Is it speed in the sense of shipping that value to them and then learning really fast? Do you expect when the product is out, do you expect that speed to be compromised, given that it's not a test environment anymore?
Yeah, or... I think it's too early to say in a way. I think I at least hope that we're able to achieve the same over time, like that core value will be there. And I think that kind of like the way we operate in like the product org in a way will take care of some of the regulatory challenges or the risks with it, because there are of course areas in our product that is more risk averse than others. Like we have one team that are focused on medication. So we're, for people who don't know, like we're creating like a core system for all health workers in municipalities in Norway, so primary healthcare. And there are different teams working on different problems, right? And one team is working on medication. So like that you prescribe the right medication, that you administer the right dosage of medication. And of course that has a lot more regulatory challenges than another team working on kind of like tasks or planning like the work. It's all important, but of course if you do some things in medication wrong, the consequences are much, much larger in a way. And we do see that the speed of those teams are different than the other teams, but it's still kind of like a core value of everyone to be focused on that and always kind of like try to balance the risk versus the reward of shipping fast in a way. And I think that's where like the pilot customers that we've had over like the last couple of years, and I think we will continue with, it's like, how do we experiment on a smaller scale with those kind of things to kind of take down the risk before launching it to others. So, yeah.
And let's dig into that, because it's interesting. It's one of the principles that you were talking about, Espen, understanding the problem really well before you ship anything, basically, or even build, I would assume. Is there any go-to techniques or any kind of, at the meta level, any reflections you have or practical advice that teams can use on how to better understand problems? It's a broad question. But...
Yeah, techniques. I don't know. There are so many. Actually, we intentionally, when I joined Uda, when we were sort of scaling it up, we tried to get rid of all sort of jargon out there on methodology and these kind of things, because we basically had a world of, lean experts from the Toyota world building factories in the car industry for years. They were part of Uda, right? Building out that. We had people coming in from design thinking and Scrum and all the sort of methodologies out there. But at the end of the day, it's a sort of a systematic approach to understanding problems, validating that we understand them, then solve for them, and so on. And they take different shapes and form in a different part of the organization. If you have a lot of data to dig in, you can, to understand the problem, that's how you do it. If if you haven't sort of seen the problem before, you have to navigate very differently. So the boring answer, it depends. But I was very intentional of hiring people that were curious about understanding what is the real problem here, and where does it lie, and not having very sort of fixated views of how to figure out what is the problem or where to look for it. Equally curious about, is it a financial problem or a logistic problem as much as a customer problem? and not having sort of just coming from one angle in it. And if they were coming from one angle, you make sure you have a team that complements you, sort of see that it's, this might be a bigger part of the problem in this direction. So I don't know, we tried rather to create the context where it just became easy to focus on it and have the capabilities to actually find the right problem. You see what I mean? Like, you have the capabilities in the team is, put very close to the problem. They have very easy access to where the problem potentially lies, right? Is that the customer, if it is on the floor, in the fulfillment center, whatever it is. So, yeah.
Can I ask, because it's interesting how we've kind of built out our teams, and it's of course different because we're in a highly regulatory space, but did you consider having like subject matter experts in the teams, either on kind of like the shop side or on the logistics side? Was that like part of hiring in a way?
Yeah, we definitely have, and still have to this day. I mean, it's take the logistics side, right? You have people who have deep expertise in running car fleets or doing shop floor management kind of thing. So definitely have a combination of those. They spot problems differently. So I think what we did more high level was to, when we were setting up the organization, it's more about how do we organize in a way where we are looking at the problem space, looking at from in an endurable way. Like, what are the problem spaces that would always be there? And in a Oda case, there are like 3 core processes that will be there forever. Right, it's the process of acquiring a customer, getting them onboarded, and getting them into the machine, and returning every week to buy. That is sort of a problem space. It's sort of this. It's the customer life cycle, and that's the one. The second problem space is buying and selling products. You have to find suppliers. You have to negotiate with them. You have to get their products. You have to set prices. You have to get them out of the store. That is sort of the product life cycle, and it's been there for the last 100 years of retail. It will be there for the next sort of 100 years. And the third problem space that we had, or value chain, was when you have an order of a product, you have to pick it and deliver it. You have to get those products to the fulfillment center. You have to pick them into boxes, and you have to get them to the door. And that fulfillment operation is also very permanent. So we'd rather look at these are permanent, or there's long longevity, for these problem spaces, and then you put teams around those and let them dig in, if that makes sense. And then in those we had, to your question, there is a bunch of subject matter experts within the retailing, or within logistics, or within growth on customer side, obviously.
Yeah, no, it's not entirely the same, but it's similar. Like, we have at least 2 like main areas or problem spaces, as you call it. Like, if you divide like municipal health services into 2 core processes, it's like, how do you administer the municipal health service? Like, how do you ensure that people get the service that they're entitled to? How do you run the health service as effectively as possible? And the other side is, of course, like, when the patients or citizens are getting the service, like, how do you actually treat them in the best manner? So those are kind of like the 2. So we've kind of organized it the same. But we've been very intentional from the start to value, what should I say, product expertise versus subject matter expertise. We of course have like doctors and nurses, etc. in our company, but we haven't had them as like core members of the product teams in a way. Yeah.
That has varied. So depending, like on the logistics side, it's been an embedded part because there's such a different operational roles you work with. Like the people picking are mostly, I mean, they also do continuous improvement at the work, but it's a bigger part of their job is to actually pick. But if you have a commercial team doing, retailing, buying and selling products, part of their job is also to sort of improve those processes and improve the way they work with them. So there we had to have a slightly different approach. And same as I would say with marketing teams, for example, right? How you can grow. You have an operational side of your role, but you also have this sort of development side of it. And then we had to find different ways of connecting with those teams. So we have different models for it.
Absolutely, and I want to add another dimension here, which is the seniority of the team. So what I've seen before is if the team is really junior, and if there's a subject matter part of the team, then that team may take those opinions as truth, for example, and not validate or go out and do as much discovery as they should. And of course, we all know that subject matters understand a lot, but sometimes they are also biased because they're very deep into the industry, and we all have our own biases. So I think it's important that the team either has the subject matter inside incorporated with the team or very close to, but is still very critical in discovering with customers and or users the actual problems, validating it, and increasing the evidence basically with experiments. So I think that's an important Marius,
I was going to say on that, like it is, but it's also like what part of the product do you need to do major discovery on versus where is like some parts of the product there's maybe not like great value to innovating a whole lot. Like there are best practices out there, you could use those, while others, like the value of doing it, like the way we kind of measure success is by saving time for the municipalities. That's like the core problem for municipalities out there, is like there's not enough time in the day to treat all the patients. So like however we can save time, and then where are the biggest problems area in those kind of journeys where we should spend time on that. And that, I think that's important for the teams to really focus in on. Like some places it's okay to take the biased opinions of the subject matter experts and iterate based on that, while others you really need to go deep in a way. Like you don't need to go as deep every place in the product.
I think it depends a bit on the risk of what you're dealing with, right? It always goes back to the risk. Like that's how I think about discovery. Like it's based on risk. The purpose of discovery is to reduce risk. So I totally understand if there are areas where the risk is really really low from shipping a small improvement, for example, then the need for discovery is reduced. I'm still a big fan of validating your hypothesis, and I wouldn't consider. That's just me. I'm a bit picky. I wouldn't consider a subject matter opinion to be evidence.
No.
But and I know you agree. But yeah, I totally agree that it is a balance, and I think that balance is much needed in the industry as well. Espen, I think you're thinking.
Yeah,
what are you thinking?
Because, so definitely, I mean, depends on I think the maturity of how good you are in that sort of core area or that process where you sort of have the subject matter expert. So in part, if the only goal is to sort of be on par with the industry and whatever, you should just listen to it, right? You don't need to, it's not a core sort of performance defining part of your product either. So right, just getting a par is sort of good enough. But some areas are core, really, really performance defining. And for us, there was a fulfillment operation was one of them, right? Or route planning was another one, or even the way we start working with prices now. And then you actually want to innovate where you find solutions that isn't industry standard at all. So so it sort of depends on where you are in this, basically. And I think secondly, subject matter experts, I mean, it depends on who they are, but they're not usually coming with the answer if they're the right person either. They're coming with an expertise and experience, and they can point and they can say, like, here we should just do a shortcut. It doesn't make sense to innovate. This is local maxima. We don't need it. And that's fine. It's good to have shortcuts. But other areas, their job, at least in Ruter, has been to innovate and create solutions that doesn't exist in industry. So you have to be equally sort of curious upon other paths forward, and it could go through code instead of your hardware knowledge, for example, or whatever it is. And so you need to have the right profiles in those roles. They're not easy to find. You need a very clear sort of, I would say, curiosity about the other disciplines, the other sort of views of the world in a way in those roles for it to succeed. Otherwise, it starts to become very hard. If you come someone who has the answer, no one had the answer in Oda of how to build an effective online grocer. So the answers in totality didn't exist, right? But on some parts of it, it could have existed. But most of the cases, actually, it didn't exist. You needed people who were curious about finding that, independent of if you're an engineer or a subject matter expert in pricing, for example.
Absolutely. Very good perspectives. All right, guys, let's move on to a new topic. CPO challenges. You've both been part of scaling organizations as a CPO, and you've probably faced a few challenges. Let's see if some similar ones or very different ones. Let's start with you, Marius. I wanted to dig into this. If you can share some challenges you face as a CPO in your current role. For any product leader who's listening to this conversation, be mindful of those challenges and how you maybe tackle them.
Yeah, I think to me there's been kind of two main challenges. One is personal, like we just went into subject matter experts, like I don't have subject matter expertise, no product. And the inherent complexity in the product that we're building is incredibly large. Like it's for all health workers, it's for inhabitants. We're building a large product. So that's been like one challenge to understand where to start. And as we went into like where should we innovate, where shouldn't we innovate, like where is the value not high enough. So that's been one. The other one is like going back to where we started on principles, on speed. I think we have very talented people. They're here to do their best work kind of thing. And a lot of them are very mindful of their craft in a way. And then when you have speed, which sometimes is at odds with quality, how do you actually balance that with the people? How do you actually kind of hold back on the ambitions of the people? Because for one, our biggest challenge is we've actually been building our product for 3 years now. We're still not in the market. We're 6 months-ish out, if plans are holding, of selling the product. Like we delivered our tender like 2 days ago, but like it won't be on board if we win, crossing our fingers, like until first quarter. So in that, to stand in that phase, and that product will be the MVP. Like that's the first minimum viable version of our product that we can sell. Like to do that for 3.5 years, it's a long time for people to stand in like call it a building phase where we're building parts of the product before we have the whole in a way. It's not like, of course we have iterated a bunch on some parts of it, but it's still building out like the big fundamentals. So I think that's been, at least for me in that role, that's been the main challenge, like the size of the product and making sure that people don't overinvest in one area where we still have other places we need to invest before we're kind of feature complete to be able to solve the core processes.
Interesting. Espen, before you dive into yours, do you have any comments to what Marius shared?
No, but I can relate to the getting to know the industry, fast while you're leading, which is a tricky one because I didn't have any grocery experience at all when joining Ruter, right? So how do you do that as a CPO? I think if you come from within the company, or if you move into the CPO role and you come from within the company or the industry, you have thought on the industry, you have thought on the problem, you have intuition on what is the important part, or what are the less important parts, and these kind of things. And it takes time to accumulate that intuition because you don't have, I say intuition, but many times you have to make decisions really fast, and you have to give priority to this versus that, and there's accumulated, built experience behind a lot of those things for being effective. So I took a very deliberate view of it when I matched my sort of, when I joined the company, my top priority was the company priority. That was my biggest challenge as well, and how could I contribute to that while learning? That was finding that balance was tricky, right? And I had to first learn parts of, I couldn't learn the entire grocery space in 10 days or 100 days. It didn't work. So yeah, sorry, long and rambling, but I think we're totally related to that challenge, in particular when you jump into a new industry. And I think everybody taking a CPO role in a new industry should be ready for that kind of complexity. Yeah.
Just a little tangent on that. We'll probably go into it later, but when I came in, like the first thing I did, like they didn't really have a product strategy. They were kind of going into this direction, and I kind of looked at it and like we need to build a new product strategy. And I built this elaborate process in a way, trying to figure out, talking to everyone, using some frameworks, etc. And then I ended up after like a week or two, like, fuck this, we can't do it like this. So I just wrote it out, basically, based on everything I learned. I wrote it out. And it's funny, I didn't know much of the industry. It took me a couple of years. Like now I feel like I know the industry in a way. But the product strategy, after talking to a lot of people inside the company and outside the company, still holds. Like the core fundamentals that I wrote out in that first month still holds. And looking at actually other companies in the same space, it holds towards those as well. It's very similar. And I don't know why, in a way, if health is like, it is a way of organizing it across markets, etc. But it's just a funny anecdote when you were going into your thing, Espen, as well. Like learning that industry, didn't know anything, but managed to set a product strategy by talking to a few people and writing it out.
But so it seems to me that one way you found to tackle that challenge, Marius, has been the writing process to surface clarity. And of course, by doing that, you're talking with a lot of different people, gathering a lot of opinions, iterating that document and having that narrative to help you challenge with that challenge. Espen, anything you did or any kind of moments you had during that challenge of being onboarded and leading and all that mix of feelings and initiatives, was there anything you did looking back that you would recommend someone that has this challenge today to do?
It's did exactly the same. Okay. Basically, you start very you assume totally. The advantage you have as a new entrant is that you look at this thing for the first time and you take the view of the customer as much as it's whatever it's internally, and you look holistically at this thing. I didn't know the details, and actually in the beginning that sort of makes it easier to create an abstract version of what this is. So I felt like, doing the same. I spoke with, my first month, 40, 50 people, across the entire company, asking them who we are, where are we heading, what are we doing, what are we good at, what are we not good at, and then just like, who is the customer, what is the value we're really trying to deliver to them, what are we not good at, and then I wrote this down and presented it back, and it's like, yes, this is who we are. And it's like, at least in that time, that was needed, because they hadn't done that sort of exercise, because they all knew it by intuitively. So it was somehow also helpful for the company to get that sort of summary, and it made me
I was just surprised, because when I kind of wrote it out, I was expecting like, no, this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong, kind of. And of course, there were elements, but in total, it kind of held up. And I was like, I'm not saying that's because I'm so smart to write it down, but it's just weird how you put it down in writing, and it was exactly what they needed in a way. It was exactly kind of like that totality of putting it together.
Yeah, but I see. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think the other thing that I felt I need to buy myself some time to learn the details of it. Where does it not hold up? Like, because you get this sort of high level view, and it's decent in a way. It holds for some high level thinking. It doesn't hold for day to day fixing. So for me, it was finding those things that was desperately needed by the organization that took me very little effort to contribute to. So I found those, like the company needed, the biggest challenge was to, set clear priorities in 2018 when I joined, like what are we doing, and shift focus from growth to operational excellence. And I knew how to do that. It was very easy. Like, let's set clear goals. Let's create a, basic process of, moving towards them. And that for me felt like I could do this with my, left hand while I learn the other things. And And I think that sort of, at least personally, felt a bit sort of, I'm still valuable in this process, right? And I could learn and dig in. And so that's been my sort of go-to later, is like, find those simple jobs that are still valuable for the company while you learn.
Very good. Any other challenges you want to highlight, Espen, before we move into the other topic?
I think it's we can move on. There's a bunch, but yeah.
Okay, good. I just wanted to ask you, because this was basically your comment to Marius' kind of challenge that he had. So, but great. Product strategy, which maybe is or hasn't been a challenge. We'll find out. But we all talked about product strategy, and it's a big topic in the industry. Obviously, very important. So I wanted to ask you both if there's any go-to steps, very clear steps or mental models that you like to use when you're setting or thinking about product strategy that you hope more people know about. So let's start with you, Espen. How do you approach product strategy? How would you approach it if you were starting in a new company now, for example?
Yeah. First one is I need to understand the purpose of the company and what are the goals of the company. If those are not clear, that's where I start solving. And that was the case in Niall and Ura. It was sort of clear in a way, but it wasn't articulated and it wasn't sort of totally aligned. So I just needed to help the founders and the team to just get it down on paper. It's like, is this what we're aiming for? Move towards that. But that is the start. So I don't create any product strategy before I fully understand why this company exists and what we're aiming for in the medium to short term. And those are goals. And then the product strategy is a vehicle to, get the company there. If it's but that is the first. And I don't know, I find this product strategy is a bit tricky because it's not always that important with a product strategy. Because what is the most important thing of the company? And, let's say 2018, when I joined, the most important thing of Oda, of everything at Oda in 2018 was to get an operational model that was extremely effective. Without that, we couldn't serve the product in a sustainable way. So the product strategy was pretty simple. It was sort of, cut the weird branches that doesn't create a lot of value, that just create complexity operationally, and keep the rest, high quality and good, and do not add a lot of things to the product. Just keep it as it is, because then if you lock down the product, you can rebuild out the operational model to sustain that product in an effective way. If you're starting to pull in a lot of weirdness into the product while you're trying to sort of fix your operational model to support it, it's going to be hard. So it was very easy to set a product strategy that year. It was basically, let's keep the product. Let's cut out those, branches that are deviations and creating weird stuff in the operation, and let's focus on operation. So that was one, and then later, I think we had other parts where we went international, and at that point we had a proof of concept in Norway, and our job was to repeat that value elsewhere in a sort of a scalable way, in a way where we had economies of scale and we didn't have to, blow up all the cost all over the place. So the job was really just to sort of, what is that core product that we have? Articulate that. So that was sort of defining that, and then the strategy was to duplicate that, repeat it. Again, not very sort of complex from a product strategy point of view. So I think my point here is that you have to really start with what are you aiming for as a company, and your product strategy can be big or small depending on that. And then obviously, when I go into the sort of details of a product strategy, I can talk about those too. But I really need to start in that part.
Very good point, Marius. Yeah, please comment on that.
Just a quick question, actually. You worked on this in Norway for quite a while, then you were talking about expansion. It was Finland, it was Germany. How did the product strategy change? What inherent capabilities in the product did you guys set as a strategy to be able to go into those different markets? Like what changed in the actual product strategy, or wasn't it that much in a way?
No, I mean, we learned in Norway what kind of product end-to-end is really needed to create, provide space for life for customer in a scale, effective way from a logistic point of view. And so I think the job when we went international was sort of just the ingoing hypothesis that we can have 100% the same. Because if we have 100% the same elsewhere, we have all the scale advantages in a very sort of margin-tight industry. Obviously, you figure out that, yes, that can work for like the shop experience. You need German language in it. So you do that deviation. That's pretty basic. And you needed PayPal to pay or, those kind of things. But everything else is the same. And then you look at delivery and so like, yeah, you can do same next day delivery. You don't need different hours. You have all those things, but you learn that in Germany, you have to be able to sell crates of beer. We had cardboard boxes, and it's like the big discussion: is it really needed? Do we need it? And we did a lot of research towards that specific topic to understand if it's important or not. And then learning that it was important, so we built out that deviation. Pricing, we could have the same sort of strategies, systems to sort of support that. It's also a local thing that can set it. So we made tooling for them to sort of figure it out. Assortment is the same, as long as we have the same SKU range and these kind of things. It's a locally sourcing, it's a local thing. So we basically learn, the strategy is more about understanding what is the core global product, where do we deviate locally, and then building out the platform to enable that. That was the job. And I think then later, the challenge was more like, okay, how do we grow in these markets? And then you need a different strategy for that. But yeah, I don't know if that really answered the question, but that was the, yeah.
Perfect. And before, Marius, you dig into or share your opinion, I just want to emphasize how important this point is, Espen, that you just mentioned. Company, the product strategy derives from the company strategy. And the story you shared is so important for more product people to understand, because I feel that a lot of product people out there are in their own silos and they all think about product, and they don't zoom out, especially if there's no product leadership in the company, to really understand what does the company need right now, where is the company headed, what are the company goals, and how does the product strategy can support those objectives. And sometimes, as you said, Espen, very well, sometimes it's not this grandiose product or this new expansion, new this and that. Sometimes it's really to just support critical aspects of the business model for the company scale.
And I think that's important to sort of dare to do that, because there is this sort of like, you're not hired to just work on finding new customer problems and solving them forever. That's not the job. Right. Most companies, they need to have different sort of optimize for different things in certain installments of time. And I felt like the most boring product CPO ever, right? They're coming in having no sort of intentionally not talking about the grand visions of what we need to build, because if I do, I make it hard to fix the operation, right? Then I have these sort of visions of what we're building for, that at the end of the day, we just need to fix the operation. So you have to be mindful of this. And I think I've held back, on occasions in Oda, where it's like, I would love to be visionary and talk about what we could do in 2 to 5 year time with all the sort of fanciness in the product, but it wasn't important. Another period, actually, we did this was in 23, when we said, when we pulled out of Germany and Finland and said, like, we need to optimize for profits. That's it. And then it was very important that that's what you're optimizing for. And then having sort of very long-term ambitions for the product just makes it really hard to be, defending bi-weekly, shipments of experiments towards profitability in the search bar. Right? So you have to sort of balance this. And I think it's the role of the product organization also to not just sort of balance it towards the product and the user goals, but actually to find enthusiasm and passion and drive, create energy in the organization towards all of those goals, reducing cost to serve, finding more customers, or create more value in the product, or, monetizing it better. You have to balance between those. And
Absolutely. Very good. Marius, if there's product leaders or product managers or founders, anyone listening to this conversation, what would you like to share when it comes to product strategy? What are some of the things that you think about when crafting a product strategy at Aidn?
I don't think there is much to add really on what Espen said and what we said earlier. I think we all agree you need to understand the company goals. I think that was, as I said, when I came in, started talking to people, that's what you're trying to understand, right? Like, where are the company at? What market are we playing in? For what reason? For who? Like, that's the core. And then you set a product strategy to accomplish that and to what are the areas we need to focus in. And for me, like, what is the value we're bringing for who? And then what are the areas we need to focus on? And that we build teams around those areas and let them solve them in a way. And then I also, what's the word? Like what Espen was talking about in regards to like wanting to be visionary. When I came in, I was super visionary, set a super product vision for where we want to be, and still have that product vision. But it's a long-term vision, right? And as I said earlier, like we've been building for 3.5 years. You can't focus on that vision while building core fundamental stuff in a way. So I had to rein in myself. I'm like, fuck, I love talking about vision. It's awesome to talk about vision, but you can't do it at the wrong time in a way. If I would have done that, people would just be disillusioned with the work they're doing today. So you have to balance that part of it.
Interesting perspective. And you mentioned we want to find those problems or value streams, and then we want to assign teams to solve those problems and let them run. How do you ensure alignment? Let's go into that part of the conversation of aligning teams, aligning with the company objectives, company direction. How do you align with the team, especially in settings where you are expanding and scaling really fast? Espen, you first.
Yeah, how do you do that? I think communication, obviously, regularly, in a systematic way, communicate sort of the big picture stuff to everyone. And that's, is it product or is it company? It's the both kind of thing. And where are we heading? Repeating that is really important. What are the goals? Who are the customers we're building for? Who are the customers we're not building for? Those are, so I have to more thought about what are those elements that everybody needs to know all the time, and we need to spend a lot of time to sort of make sure that they're up to date on it. And we found this purpose, the behaviors, the goals, who is the core target audience, who is not. Repeat that. So we build for the same. Very often people skip that, and then they make our own idea of who is the most important. We spend a lot of time on what is the core product, what is it not, what are and that needs to be for everyone joining the company, and repeat that. And then we've made so those are fundamentals that I think you need to communicate widely, often. And what we've done, at least, which worked, I think, pretty well, is that you make sure it's part of all the onboarding flows. You make sure that it's part of, there's a regular rhythm where you actually bring this up. If that is monthly all hands, if that is, you have a cadence where it's sort of, you pull people out at the same time, they get the same information at the same time, they're receptive for it in that period, and then you move back in. So I think that's my second point, is you have to find those spots that you need to communicate regularly, limit them, but do that. And then I think what I believe is crucial, and that is to make sure that people are receptive for those, big picture stuff when they hear it. They're in a mode where you actually are, that's your job now. So I'll take it from the daily practice. So 9 o'clock every morning in the fulfillment center, there is a daily stand-up. People are excused from picking, people are excused from their operation. They go there, and that's your job now, to sort of align around what are the core things that are working, what are the things that are not working. And it's a specific, it doesn't last long, but it's 9 o'clock, and that's when or changing over time, but that's where it happens. So everybody is receptive for that sort of alignment, right, of what is important, what's working, and what's not, and then you go back and you create autonomy again. And I think we do that on daily cycle in the operation. You do it on a monthly cadence on the company. You do it on whatever team cadence you have in your team. But you need to make sure that it's a sort of you're actually not randomly doing it. I think that's the other part, because if you do it randomly, people are not in the headspace for it, or they're occupied with else, and then you try to align, but they're not there. I think that would be the other aspect of it. I think if you think about the big picture stuff, those would be core.
Very good. Marius?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's super hard in a way. The faster you grow, the harder it is. I think I had a big realization over the last 6 months when I'm coming back, like on my part, like the main part of my job is to give strategic context to everyone. And that's only on me. And then how do you do that across the company on all levels? Because we all need to do that. How do kind of like the product teams keep customer success updated? How do sales keep product updated? What are our plans? How are we tracking against our plans? So we experimented with a lot of different things there. Like we have our OKR setup. We have monthly check-ins. We've created delivery plans to make sure customer success get the information they need so that they can work with the customers and onboard them at the right stage. We've lately worked with like creating account with people to align people around different initiatives. So we've tried a lot of different things, and I'm not sure any one of them has been like perfect, but it's all kind of like experimenting with different things and going back to where we kind of started. It's like you iterate on all those approaches as well. Like we had our management meeting this like a monthly management meetup today right before this, and we're talking about how we track progress towards our goals towards Christmas. And in that discussion, we're like, one thing I said is like, we're so much further now than last time we did it. If there's one thing I'm sure about, it's like, it's not going to be great coming out of this period either. Like we will iterate on it again, like next quarter. So it's like a continuous process of always trying to share enough context. And you were never able to share enough context in a way. I could spend my whole day sharing context to everyone, and they would still be asking for more. In a way. So you just have to keep repeating.
Very good point. So looking, Espen, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking about this sort of. There's all these mechanisms like meetings, rituals. Open documentation, like easy access, transparency, all of those things are key to, from sort of ambient awareness of what happens to systematic alignment on certain topics. And but I'm back to this sort of being in the headspace for being aligned, making sure that people are in the headspace for it, and actually also that they're pulled to be aligned. Like, what's the value of caring about what the other teams are working on, or what's the bigger picture, right? And then it's like creating a strong sense of ownership to the success of the total company. Create the pull for being aligned on what happens in the company. If you don't have that, if you're only worried about your side, there's no reason to sort of be aligned on what happens on the other side of the aisle in a way, right? Mm-hmm. So if you create a culture where extremely sort of distributed sense of ownership of the success of the total company, that's a way to create pull for alignment. Another way to create pull for alignment is speed. Right? If you're moving really fast, you're missing out if you're not sort of showing up for the all hands. If if you don't move fast, you could always pick it up later. You don't, it won't. You have plenty of time to sort of see the changes before they're coming. So I think there's many elements that sort of creates an environment where you also want to be aligned in a way. And I think we very often talk about those rituals and those other things, but you have to think about those too.
Mm-hmm. I think that's super interesting point, actually. How do you both to get that, but how do you actually create it? That's
Absolutely. And Marius, I know you're hiring a director of product right now, and in a way, as you scale, of course, hiring decisions and different teams and the whole team topology and constant reorganization. That's also a way to ensure that you're meeting your goals and sometimes adding new rituals or new ways of working to ensure that you are aligned. But let's talk about team topologies a little bit. It's a big topic, so I just want a brief overview because there's a lot of folks that look at UDA, look at Aidn and other companies, and they're thinking, I wonder how they organize themselves to deliver value. I wonder how their product teams look like. So if you can spend just a couple of minutes on sharing some critical aspects of how you organize and whether you feel that has been a success, a key for the success today. Marius, you first. A few thoughts on team topologies from you.
Okay, so like our core product is built upon a bunch of different components. If I go into our teams, we have like a team that's working on medication, as I said earlier. We have a team working on the core journal. We have a team working on collaboration. So it's all these kind of building blocks of the product, right? Then at the same time, we are to deliver that core product into a bunch of different business areas of the municipalities. So it could be like home services, or it could be institutions, or it could be physical therapy. Like those are other kind of journeys where you have to deliver a holistic experience. Then we have to do that across, so there's kind of like 3 dimensions, also across like nurses and doctors and health workers, and they all have different needs across the different product. And they all need, like, the teams need to build a holistic journey for their product area in a way. Then we need to build the same for the business areas, and we need to build the same for the holistic journey. So the way we've done that is like we are focusing on those teams, and then we're building on top. Like you said, I'm hiring a director, and in that we're dividing it into administrative and clinical space, and they will take on like the more holistic part of it to foster alignment within that group. But there's also like strong interdependencies between the areas, so they have to work together as well, like across the different areas. That's at least how we built it now, and we'll see where it takes us in like a year or 2.
But just to be clear for those listening, when you say teams, we're talking about cross-functional teams with design, engineering, product, and maybe subject matter here and there for your case? Okay, good. Because I just want to clarify, because some people have different setups. Espen, what?
Yeah, no, it's typical, normal, what should I say, product trio with engineers and designer on the side, so.
Okay. What about you, Espen? Anything looking back that...
I can sort of just take this sort of how it, it looks right about now. I think it has gone through many iterations over time, but as I mentioned... Of course. There's sort of the same 3 subsystems or process that I talked about. They've been through for as long as I worked at Ura. So there's the customer journey, there's the retailing, product life cycle, and then there's the order life cycle of fulfillment and delivery, and they remain true. We have operational teams on marketing, on commercial, on the fulfillment centers operations that are, operating those processes every single day, and then we have development. We called it platforms to support all of those things, right? So there's the shopper platform, working on the shopper journey, and there's the commercial platform working on the retailing product lifecycle journey, and then there's the logistic platform working on operational journey. So that's sort of how we break it down, and then within those, and that's been true. Naming has changed over time, but it's sort of the same basics. For long period. And I think that's been really important to have that sort of consistency, because then you made sure that you've had institutional sort of knowledge is remembered of what is the problem, what's working, what's not working, and then actually you understand that this we tried to solve before is not an important one, and you sort of build in memory of those problem spaces in the structure. So those we've had. There were teams, and now there are areas of teams. And then within those, there is mostly I would call them like topologies. I guess it's stream aligned teams. within, because for most of those, like logistics, it makes just a whole lot of sense because the processes in the fulfillment center is physically sort of separated, right? You have procurement, and then you have picking, and then you have delivery, right? So you have those teams for each of those. And the same is true for commercial, less so on the customer side, because the customer is totally random. You don't control that process, right? So you have to find different approaches there. So then we've gone through, depending on, it's a growth phase or more on activation, retention, that kind of thing. So that's been the core, I think. And in those teams, yes, PM, there's engineering, there's data, there's design, there's occasionally subject matter experts more on logistics than the other sides. And then we had enabling teams below that, sort of on more strategy, operations, very small on the customer side, so like keep them as minimal as possible. And then we had, I would say, platform teams for data platform, tech platforms. So that's been set up for a long period of time. And I think that consistency has been really important. And it's made it actually pretty easy to be on this roller coaster, to sort of go from one set of optimizing for growth to optimizing for profits, and without, you still do big changes in the org, but there's still, you still have a core memory, I would say, of what's important and not.
Very good. We are running out of time, but I want to dig into one reflection on both of you. If there's anything, so you both have very strong track record as CPO with lot of different experiences. Looking back, is there anything you've changed your mind on recently? Or Espen, do you want to go?
I don't think I've changed my mind necessarily. I just changed my passion, and I found way more passion, to be honest, in optimizing for reducing cost to serve and distributing the product to people in an effective way, and monetizing it, more than just creating value for customers. And it's not sort of changing my mind, but it's a function of exposure. And I think I've been lucky over the last 7 years to be way more exposed into those challenges and development for those specific goals. Where I think in my prior, jobs, it was more separated. Your job is to create value. There's someone else's job to sort of distribute that value to consumers, and there's a third person's job to sort of think about reducing the cost of those core processes. So I think that has been important, and I think, and I think in some cases, I think the first, at least what I experienced in Norway here, when it's opening, starting to push for product being a sort of discipline or function and having a role, I think that the first entry point was around the customer value and creating that. And I think it has taken time to get access, like honest access to the P&L in the company, honest access to sort of what is the how do you actually build a sustainable business? And I think, getting that access has definitely made me passionate about those problems too.
Very good. Marius, what about you?
Yeah, I think it goes a little bit back to what we talked about around speed. I think the weight of what that value brings us as a company has been, and it's been set, like our CEO is super focused on it. And what I have gained from taking that on, like really appreciating the need for speed and the value of speed. I think that's been the biggest change for me. But I also think some of the aspects of what Espen is saying, like the business side of things, how we can leverage product to accomplish very, very good business goals is important. Like how can we expand the market in different manners, whether or not that is increasing the reach or increasing the revenue of the existing user base, or how we can expand the user base in a way into different markets. I think that's those two elements, like the business side of product and the speed. I think so.
If I may, if you look sort of zoom out, if you look over the last 10, 20 years of software in the world, and you're getting that up and running, and you're developing for it, and you're not sure how to create customer value with this software thing, what are the, of course, product plays a crucial role in defining those products and creating that experience for the customer. I think the fundamental challenge in the next 10 years is, creating sustainable business in that. If you look to the number of bankruptcies from the last 5 years, it's a very different sort of phase of not just creating value for consumers of those software products, but I'm thinking more towards the software space, but actually profiting on those. And I think that's why I think it's crucial that product finds passion in those problem statements as much moving forward, and try to get access on those side of the table, I think, in organizations too.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you know what, there's been an evolution in product as well, which, maybe unfortunate evolution, I would say, in my opinion, because back in the day, product was business. Product management was business. Actually, brand management in the FMCG industry, fast moving consumer goods, is business. You're trying to grow the brand, as in not just through branding, but actually business results. And then at some point we have this, the Scrum movement, which derived from the Agile movement, but I would argue, I think, contaminated a lot of product people, or the way people think about product management, because product management all of a sudden started to be associated with what you would see a product owner doing, this a la Scrum product owner. And today, what you see a lot, unfortunately, is many product managers, quote unquote product managers, that have no idea what business they're in, the industry they're trying to tap into, the growth, the market trends. They have no idea what the market size is. They're not even thinking about market sizing. They're not even thinking about growth, because that's handled by a growth department or a marketing department. They're just thinking about their little product or the little feature, in the unfortunate cases where you have 100 PMs for managing one product. And I think that's very unhealthy. That really resonates, Espen, that I actually don't think, I'm confused sometimes what got us here as an industry, to think that business is not part of what product management is all about. And Jeff Gothelf, just to finish my rant, Jeff Gothelf, he argues, for example, to your point, Espen, that customer value equals business value. If you manage to so that's his argument, in a way, that if you manage to bring customer value, you're going to bring business value. Although there's a lot to unpack there, but I can see both of you are very eager to talk. So Marius, you go first.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with both of you in a way, but it's interesting because now you're bringing in kind of like historic product management or product in a way. And if you go, like, it's a pendulum, right? And then it was totally on the business side. Then it became totally on like the user value side without really thinking too much about the business. And now it seems like over the last 3-4 years, it's like swinging back in a way. Then it's interesting to see if we find the equilibrium, or if we'll now go there, and then like in 10 years, like we'll go back again.
But I think it's a functionally extreme amount of development needed over the last decade. It has to be figuring out what is that product market fit for this new kind of experience in a digital context that we don't have. Right, it doesn't exist. So it does make sense that you start with validating that you're creating actual customer value and caring deeply about that, discovering customer. Like, everybody wants to do discovery and finding those problems to solve for the customer, and then you start building a best business on the back of that. And I think that sort of makes sense, that it's sort of gone, because it's technological to sort of shift, moving you over to a new sort of technology and a platform and a place where you have to hunt for that customer value. But now that is pretty clear. I mean, iPhone 16 versus iPhone 15, it's super boring, the changes, right? And the amount of new apps you install every day and changing your life fundamentally isn't sort of the same pace that it was 10 years ago. So obviously, and the same is true for funding, for finding those new experiences. They're becoming mature businesses. Facebook is 20 years old, or Meta. So it makes total sense that you sort of pendulum sort of swings back, and you have to earn your worth in a way. So I think it's just, and I think it was interesting because when at least I felt that when I asked the question, where are all the product managers in Norway, way more than 10 years ago when I joined and moved back to Norway, and I was like, it was clear that Norway was then just starting on this sort of figuring out how to create customer value in a digital context. And then we did that. Where the rest of the world had started that in 2004, right? So we were a bit late on that, and now we're sort of catching up on the business side, and we can learn from others on that. So, So my point is just, I think it's going to be crucial for everybody in product to be extremely passionate about a business model and the P&L moving forward. Yeah.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Guys, this was a blast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Make sure you subscribe to my newsletter so you don't miss out, and see you next time.